Thank you very much. And yeah, thank you, Jairo, for the opportunity. Let me first just check something if this is working. If you've been following news at all in the past few weeks, one of the faces that you might have come across quite a lot is this. Her name is Malala Yousafzai. She's 14-year-old. She has been an activist for education in a very dangerous area of Pakistan. It has become more dangerous than it used to be. And recently, an assassin tried to shoot her, and she was shot in the head. And she is now in Birmingham. Initially, it seemed very likely that she might die, but she is now recovering. And the news about her has been all over the place. And as you can see, that Amnesty International has devoted a campaign to her. Then you have her appearing on Newsweek covers. Then you also have the United Nations devoting an international day, that was the day before yesterday, to her. So she's a courageous person. She's been campaigning for education in a very dangerous area, and she was the subject of a very cowardly attack. So all of this is very welcome, and it's very well deserved that she should be getting all this attention. But before I move on, yes, so Angelina Jolie, also, in case you don't follow news, so you might have come across her also, because Angelina Jolie wrote an article about her and said we are all Malala. And then there were also a scholarship that was established in her name. And if that was not sufficient, so she was also paid tribute by a liberated woman from the West in the way that probably is most seemed appropriate to her. This is Madonna. She thought that was the best way to pay tribute to a person who is so she decided to do a striptease on stage in Malala's honor. That didn't go down very well, and even the Daily Mail found that a bit objectionable. So as you can see, that there has been considerable amount of attention paid to this. But what you might not have seen is this picture, or you might not even know her name. Her name is Nadia. She's 10 years old, and she was at school when both her parents got incinerated in a drone attack. She, being the only child, is now moved in with her aunt, and she says that she has no source of income, and with my parents gone, my aunt looks after me now, and I help her in the house, but I want to be able to go to school. I want an education. Please ask the government to provide me with a stipend so I can get an education. So clearly there seems to be a common concern here. Both are very keen on education, except in this case, this did not receive any attention. In fact, she was interviewed last time in 2010, and her name only appears now in the media. In fact, it doesn't appear in the media. I had to pick it out of a report that was published by Columbia University recently. The report did get a few mentions in the media, but overall, her story has been lost. Generally, the way this reporting occurs is something like this. Whenever you have a news of a drone attack, you have a report something like this, as you can see in the BBC, deadly missile strike, and it mentions how many people got killed. It tells you how the area in which this attack occurred is infested with terrorists, and on and on and on. But what you will not find is any mention of who the dead were. Assumption will be, because it's been implied throughout that this place is inhabited by very dangerous people, very nasty people, and that is about where the story leaves it. It doesn't tell you who the dead were. Next is another story that was from 21st August 2009, and the stories are still online. You can go and check these out. And the next one, this one is from October 18th, 2010. As you can see, once again, it goes on, doesn't mention who got killed. It says that militants were targeted. and on and on and on. And so this is the kind of reporting that you generally get in the media about what's happening in the region. What you will not know is people like these. The two girls on the left and the kid, they're standing next to the smoldering rubble of their home. What they have in their hands are, again, what they have picked out of the rubble. What they do not know is that both their parents are dead when this picture was taken, and also their little brother, 7 years old. His name is Sayyid Wali Shah. The parent's name was Bismillah Khan. And again, these are not names that you will have to struggle to find any of these names, or for that matter, these pictures. These pictures were taken by a fellow from Waziristan, a guy called Noor Behram. He went around, he tried to shoot the aftermaths of each one of the drone strikes. Then there is Naeemullah, 10 years old, also killed in one of the drone strikes. If you read, again, the articles that were published at the time about what happened during the drone strikes, you will not mention the name of Naeemullah. His name is Tariq Aziz. He's 16 years old, and this is a picture taken in Islamabad. It's taken by a friend of mine. He came to Islamabad to meet, some of you might be familiar with the name of Clive Stafford Smith, the international law expert. Clive Stafford Smith was in Islamabad to try to investigate what is happening with the drone attacks. He has been lobbying for a very long time. He has been litigating against the death penalty in the United States and in Pakistan, and also against the death penalty in Pakistan too. But recently he has picked up the case of the drone war as well, because this was the person who took the Bush administration to court and got the detainees at the Guantanamo Bay the right to representation, legal representations. This person is now investigating the drone attacks. So he went to Pakistan. He got many people from the FATA region to come and visit Islamabad, because it's too dangerous to go to the region where the bombings are occurring. So they came to Islamabad. He was one of the people, and he, 16-year-old Tariq Aziz, agreed at that time that he's going to do the same thing that Noor Behram did, that he's going to take pictures of the aftermath, because this is the thing, the place is just too dangerous, journalists don't go there. So all we get whenever a drone attack occurs is immediately afterwards you get two statements, one anonymous Pakistani official and one an anonymous US official. Both have a reason not to reveal the adverse consequences or the civilian casualties in the attacks. Pakistani officials, because it's embarrassing for them that their sovereignty is being breached again and again, and also the governments have been complicit, so they do not want to reveal the human cost of this war. And the US officials, for obvious reasons, because they do not want to make it seem like the war has any cost at all. So he and his 12-year-old cousin, just days after they met Clive Stafford Smith in Islamabad, they go back and their car is blown up by a US drone. Previous Friday he had attended, just the Friday before that, and Tariq had been planning to join this campaign, that he is going to take pictures. The strike was first reported as having killed 4 militants. If you look it up even still, the reports, that's what it says. 4 militants were killed. Actually, it was just 2 kids in a car who were killed. And then, according to unnamed Pakistani security officials, so that is usually the kind of sourcing that you get in the media. That is who gets to make the claims about who has died. Now, there's something interesting about that. I went to Pakistan. I spoke to Rahimullah Yousafzai, who's the most respected journalist in the Northwest, and also people from FATA. One of the things everybody is going to tell you if you go and speak to anyone over there is that after the drone attacks, nobody visits to confirm who has died. Neither Pakistani nor anyone else, nobody confirms who has died. So it's not just that they are making false claims, it is that they don't even have an interest in establishing who the actual victims of these attacks are. Now, if you look at what has been happening with the drone war, the numbers that are most frequently cited, the statistics that are most frequently cited, come from a think tank called the New America Foundation. Now, the thing about it is that New America Foundation, otherwise a good, decent, liberal institution, it has some very decent scholars, some very good names, but the drone operation, the person who's in charge of it, is very much invested in, he's very close to the Obama administration, so he is very much invested in the Obama administration's policies. And since drone policy has become very much the signature of the Obama administration, so what they do is that they present these numbers. I call it the magical realism, because if you're familiar with the genre of magical realism, what happens in there, the most familiar names would be people like Gabriel Garcia Marquez. What they do is that you have a fantastic story, fantastic as in it is in the realm of fantasy, but told with utmost seriousness. So it is told with complete seriousness. So something similar happens with these numbers, that you have this appearance of rigor, that these people are keeping a very thorough database. So if you go to the New America Foundation's website, so they maintain a huge database in which each drone attack, or so they claim, is recorded, and who the victims were, everything is recorded. So I just showed you the pictures of those kids who had died in those specific incidents. Here is how they recorded them. 5 to 7 militants killed, and no civilian, and no unknowns either. So they know very well who has died. So obviously there's no mention of those kids who have died. Either those kids, the 7-8-year-old also counts as a militant. Same again for the second incident I showed you, in which these two kids died, the 16-year-old and the 12-year-old. What does it say? 2 to 4 militants, no civilians, and no unknowns. So they're very sure of what they're reporting. And what is their source? They also publish a PDF document with all the original articles. So what is their source? So they've collated all the different news items that have appeared about this incident. And so it gives this appearance that these are very thorough people. They are giving something very thorough. So I got into this whole thing because I found something rather questionable about this. So I started going through specific incidents. So here's what I discovered. Some things made me suspicious. The first one was, there's a head of the Pakistani Taliban, a guy called Baitullah Masood. Baitullah Masood was reported dead 16 different times. So obviously 15 of the people who died could not have been Baitullah Masood, unless he's a cat with, an additional number of lives that he has won as a bonus. Then June 3, Ilyas Kashmiri, another leader, gets killed, except he had been reported dead a year back, and in between he had somehow been resurrected to come and give an interview to the press as well. So you have some very interesting incidents happening here, and you have then Mullah Sangin, at least twice he experienced resurrections. He comes out of from the afterlife, and then again, finally when he is killed, it's at a funeral. A funeral is targeted, 83 people are killed, and he's among them, except he wasn't being targeted. The person who was being targeted was Baitullah Masood. So as you can see, the intelligence is very poor. The people who are being killed, we do not know most of the time who they are, except they are being recorded in the press, where they say that press is the first draft of history, except this is a very bogus history that is being written. And the people who are making these very dubious facts, they are sort of making them, they're concretizing them into history, are institutions like the New America Foundation, because they are legitimizing completely bogus numbers. And finally, over 3,000 people have been killed in Pakistan. Only 51 names are known to the CIA. So the CIA, and they have a fancy name for them, they call them high-value targets. Everyone else, they are called signature targets, which means they don't know who they are, but they look bad, so they kill them. So 51 names are known out of the 3,000 people. Bear that in mind whenever next time people give you statistics about how accurate these drone strikes are and how they have reduced civilian casualties, because there are people who say that, including Human Rights Watch, which was a disgraceful thing, because I'll come to that later. Okay, these faces you might be familiar with. US position now, 2012. Here's Barack Obama. He was in a Google Plus and a YouTube forum in which he was asked about the drone strikes, and his response to it was, when he was asked about civilian casualties, he said that actually drones have not caused a huge number of civilian casualties. For the most part, they have been very precise. This is a targeted, focused effort of people who are on a list of active terrorists who are trying to go in and harm Americans, hit American facilities, American bases, and so on. This thing is kept on a very tight leash. It's not a bunch of folks in a room somewhere just making decisions. Now, just the previous example I gave you falsifies this claim, because we might all agree that Baitullah Masood was a terrible person, but he was not threatening any American facilities. He was a threat to Pakistan, yes, but he was not threatening any American facilities. So that, even if we take the worst example, is proven false already. Now here is Leon Panetta, who was initially his director of CIA and later became the defense minister. So he said, I can assure you that in terms of the particular area, it is very precise and is very limited in terms of collateral damage. Very frankly, it's the only game in town in terms of confronting or trying to disrupt Al-Qaeda leadership. So that is, both of them are rather sure that this is a great policy. Except, you know, this is Obama, Nobel Peace Prize winning leader of the United States. Except this was not the policy even under George Bush. This is an Israeli drone, and in 2001, when it killed a Palestinian militant, here is how the US ambassador to Israel responded, which was the official US policy at this time. The United States government is very clearly on record as against targeted assassinations. They are extrajudicial killings, and we do not support that. That is July 2001. This is the Bush administration. And this is the former CIA director, George Tenet. Again, this is just a week before 9/11. He's saying it would be a terrible mistake for the director of Central Intelligence to fire a weapon like this. Both are aware of the moral implications of a weapon like this. Now, how did the policy start? George Bush was the first one in Pakistan to use it. Afghanistan, it begins 4th of February 2002. Mir Ahmad, Jahangir Khan, and Daraz Khan are killed while searching for scrap metal. These are 3 villagers. And why were they killed? Because the drone noticed that there's a tall man. There's a tall man, you know, that's Osama bin Laden was 6'5" inches. So there's a tall man with a beard, and he's acting suspicious. So drone fires and kills 3 people. And here are the 3 individuals, villagers from Khost in Afghanistan. Except the tallest man, Daraz Khan, whom they suspected, is 5'11". So there's a bit of a difference between 5'11" and 6'5". So that is how a lot of the time these kind of determinations are made, that who is a target. Pakistan, the first drone attack occurs 18th of June 2004. Naik Mohammed, whom you see over there, he was, I think, 28 or so years old. And he had just signed a peace treaty with the Pakistani government, because Pakistani government had just launched a military attack inside Fatah region, which had been, since the independence of Pakistan, had been off limits. There's an agreement, so it was off limits to the Pakistani military. Since British times, the Pakistani military hadn't entered. So the first time Pakistani military enters and these people shoot back, and so a big Pakistani military also engages in massive collective punishment, and so a war ensues, and Pakistani military suffers a lot of casualties. So finally they sign a peace treaty, and as soon as it's signed, the CIA eliminates him. And Pakistani government, too embarrassed to admit, this was the first attack, too embarrassed to admit that it was the US that did it, so they went ahead and admitted that no, we ourselves did it. And the response to that was that immediately you had retaliatory attacks inside Pakistan beginning as a consequence of this. Then Yemen, next one. 3rd of November, it's before that. It's 3rd of November, 5 suspected Al-Qaeda members get killed, but they include also a US citizen, Ahmad Hijazi. Bush administration was so criticized for that, for killing a US citizen, that they decided not to use drones inside Yemen again. So during 2002 till the end of Bush's presidency, no drone strikes occurred inside Yemen. That is a picture of a funeral just before it was bombed by a US drone. This is a former CIA official. He was giving an interview to Jane Mayer of The New Yorker. He says, "Believe me, no tall man with a beard is safe anywhere in Southwest Asia." And so, again, this is from inside the CIA. It's like a video game. This is a drone operator who is giving an interview to Peter Singer, whose book Wired for War is really good. It's about the whole robotics revolution in the military. It's like a video game. It can get a little bloodthirsty, but it's fucking cool. That is a drone operator. And here is James Jeffrey. He's a former British military army captain. He is now, I think he just got his, he was now studying at Harvard. And he recently gave an interview to the BBC, and this was his statement, because he once nearly killed children while he was operating a drone. And so he is speaking based on his experience. He says how easy it is to make mistakes. So he said, it's very easy to kill if you don't view the target as a person. When I went to Iraq as a tank commander in 2004, the fire orders I gave the gunner acknowledged some legitimacy of personhood. Coxman, 100 feet front. 5 years later in Afghanistan, the linguistic corruption that always attends war meant we would refer to hotspots, multiple packs on the ground, and prosecuting a target or maximizing the kill chain. This is the kind of language that is currently being used. So it's very antiseptic, it's very impersonal, and the whole purpose of that kind of language is to make everything almost mechanical, that you don't think about what you're doing. Now, this is, as you can see, how the drone attacks have proceeded. Under Bush, 2004, this isn't just in Pakistan. As you can see, just one drone strike. Next year, 3. Then next year, 3 more. This is the Bush years. You know, Bush, remember the bad guy? And then 2007, 5. But when does the drone attacks escalate? 2008. Why? Because candidate Obama, who's running for presidency, starts attacking Bush for being soft on terrorism. So in response, Bush starts to prove his manhood, and he launches 38 attacks in that year. But when Obama comes on, he shows that he is what the kind of stuff he's made of. So that is the first year, 55. Next year, 128. Then 2011, 75. And so far, in just this year, there have been 42. And one of the reasons why there have been less is because now there has been significant resistance from Pakistan, because in one of the drone attacks, Pakistani soldiers got killed, a lot of them. And the government then banned all NATO convoys going through Pakistan. And without that supply line, US is very much crippled. So that's why what happened is that now there was pressure, so drone attacks were reduced. Let me just say before I show you this graph that I do not endorse these numbers, simply because I appreciate the Bureau of Investigative Journalism they are very thorough. I know the person who's leading this project, Chris Woods, is a superb journalist. He's a superb, very careful journalist. What they are trying to do is they are going through, unlike the New America Foundation, they pursue a story, they follow multiple leads, and they try to establish that who got killed. Most of the times it's impossible, but they have been able to establish that in each one of these instances, you know, the red lines, that there is this minimum number who certainly were civilians. Most of the people who died we don't know, because nobody visits there, and the media just says everybody claims. But my problem with the numbers is that because they also start from the premise that everybody is militant until proven innocent, or until proven civilian. So that's why I have an issue with the fact that people should, I think they say that the numbers they say are reported killed, because most of the time they're relying on the press. But the thing is, it should be acknowledged that these numbers can never give you an accurate estimate of what the actual level of killing is. As I said, only 51 people, they actually know who they are. So most of the time, we are relying on the assumptions of the CIA, and there are a few things that are worse than that. Okay, so This is the most rigorous record, and as I said, my problem with that. And there were 17 drone strikes. Now, this is the thing. When Pakistan was being ruled by the former dictator, Pervez Musharraf, so under his rule, there were 17 drone strikes in all. And then 18th of August 2008, when he steps down, so the civilians take over. And since then, there have been 333. And we learned from people like Seymour Hersh that actually the current Pakistani Prime Minister, who is better known in Pakistan as Mr. 10%, and now they call him Mr. 110% because he used to take, when he was only the husband of a prime minister, he used to take 10% cut in every government deal, and now he has become the prime minister himself, so apparently he takes significantly more. So he gave an interview to Seymour Hersh of the New Yorker, and he said that I have no qualms about this, go ahead. That was essentially what he said to what he says to the CIA. Finally, under Bush, there was a total of 52 strikes, as I just said, total of 52. And since Obama took over, there have been 298. And that number might have gone up today because the attacks are ongoing. Total deaths so far, as you can see, it can only be a range because most of the time we don't know. So from the minimum of 2,593 to a high of 3,300. Obama maintains a kill list. And as you can see, that looks like a very nice meeting, for a very sort of almost avuncular figure sitting there, looking rather reflective, and there's the very likable Mr. Obama. Except this is a meeting in which they discuss kill lists. And according to the New York Times, the targets include everything, including 17-year-old girls and children. So and children were killed. I'll give you some, again, I'll show you some of the examples of that. So there are two drone wars that are happening. One is an overt war, which is run by the military, which is different because the military still has, for all its other flaws, it has a chain of command. It has accountability to a certain extent. And so what happens is that there is at least some degree of oversight in the military war, which is happening mostly in Afghanistan. It was happening in Iraq as well. But the one that is happening in Pakistan, that is the covert side. It is run by the CIA, and more recently also there's a Special Operations Command. It's called JSOC, and Joint Special Operations Command. What they do is that everything that they are doing is very much completely secret, so you have to rely essentially on Obama's judgment. So as we can see, as I'll show you some examples that why there are reasons why that judgment should not be relied upon regardless of how nice a person you might think he is. So CIA developed something that initially they were just going for people that they knew, people who had actually done something. But then they thought that that is not good enough. So they started using something called the pattern of life analysis. So let's say that you're sure that there's one bad guy. Now what you do is that you have the drone hovering above, and it keeps there, and you try to look at, okay, who does this guy meet and who does he go and see? And so it keeps on collecting this information, and then based on that it makes its judgment that, okay, look, this guy, bad guy, is meeting somebody else, must be a bad guy too. So that's how they collect all the information, and that's how most of the killings have been occurring. Pattern of life and intelligence. And that is why you don't know most of the names of the people who were killed, neither does the CIA. Double tap. Now, again, sounds like something innocuous. Double tap is when you actually first, CIA, the new tactic that they have been using for the past 3 years is that they first kill somebody and then they wait for rescuers to gather. So as soon as rescuers gather, then they launch another strike. Why? Because again, there was a statement, I have the reference at the end, this absolutely important piece that appeared in the New York Times that you must check out, because a lot of this might sound fantastic almost. So they use double taps because when anybody comes to the rescue, so the automatic assumption is that they must be bad guys too. Why else would they be coming to the rescue of a terrorist? So consequence of that has been that you have rescuers and even agencies, humanitarian agencies, they wait for a minimum of 6 hours before they approach any site. So most of the time they're injured there, and most of the time there are people who are still alive, but you cannot go and rescue them because it's just too dangerous and you're risking your life. Then personality versus signature strikes. Personality strikes when they know who they are. So 51 times they launch personality strikes, but most of the time they're launching what are known as signature strikes. When they don't know, but the person looks suspicious, might be bad, so just launch a missile. So this is Obama's ambassador to Pakistan. He says, Cameron P. Munter has complained to colleagues, this is again in the same New York Times story, that the CIA strikes drive American policy there, saying he didn't realize that his main job was to kill people, a colleague said. That's what he told a colleague. Now, the question that is always raised is that why is this worse than, just a bombing from a jet? Why not from an F-16, or why not from a bomber? Why is this any worse? And of course, isn't it more precise, so doesn't that make it better? The thing is, as you can see over there, this is a F-117. It is launching a GBU-28, a precision bomb. That is a target which was hit back during the 1991 Gulf War. This was a bomb shelter where about 428 people were gathered during the bombings, US bombings. But then what happened is that the CIA said that no, this is a command and control center. So the GBU-28 goes, it is so accurate that two separate planes lose the bombs, and they strike within inches of each other. And what they do is they incinerate 408 women and children who are all gathered there. So your weapon can be very precise, but if your intelligence is poor, results could be similar. And the problem with precision is that because it gives you more confidence, it makes it more likely for people to use these weapons, and that is what's happening with the drones too. Now, you look at the progression. During the World War II, you had a B-17, which used to drop up to 9,000 bombs to hit a single target. Then, by the time you go to the Korean and Vietnam War, an F-104 would drop 176 guided bombs to hit a single target. There was an incident in which one bridge was being attacked, and it took them, it was several days of massive bombing to hit a single bridge. And then, that is the F-117, and could hit 8 out of the 10 targets with its precision-guided bombs. With drones, it has become almost, you can bring it down to the accuracy down to inches. So it is a very accurate weapon, but that is not what makes it any less lethal. Now, drones, the reason why they are very dangerous is because they eliminate the political costs. Obama would not be sending an F-16 there, but he does send a drone. And look at, this is the worldwide response to the drone attacks. Who supports it, who doesn't? Look at that. In the United States, you have a 62% approval of the drone attacks. The only other country where there are a majority support the drone war, although I shouldn't say majority, a plurality, is India, where most people are indifferent. They don't have an opinion, but Britain is also right next to the United States. I mean, it's just a marginal difference. You can see, because most of these people do see that, according to the media narrative, that this is a very antiseptic weapon of war, that it's making killing so much more precise, and it is making it so less bloody. I'm going to the, okay, now this is Admiral Dennis Blair, who was Obama's former director of national intelligence. It is politically advantageous thing to do, low cost, no casualties, no US casualties, gives the appearance of toughness. I mean, that is what Obama is trying to project most of the time, because Republicans keep on attacking him. It plays well domestically, and it is unpopular only in other countries. Any damage it does to the national interest only shows up over a long term. So this is Obama's own director of national intelligence. Then Clive Stafford Smith, the lawyer, he says the drones drastically lower the threshold at which politicians are willing to kill, because there is effectively no political downside. It's all secret. If you kill the wrong person, it's somebody else's death. You are not in any way paying the cost. And drones are also cheap to produce compared to something like the F-117. Drones are a technological step. This is at the School of Law, Professor Mary Dudziak from the University of Southern California. Drones are a technological step that further isolates the American people from military action, undermining political checks on endless war. So what she is essentially saying that it is making endless war possible because there are no longer any political checks. Who's going to stop it and for what reason if it's just so cost-free? Because in the past, Vietnam was stopped because most people just didn't want to be drafted in. So what happens now is that there's no reason why you would want this drone to stop because you're not paying any costs. There is Barack Obama, nice, likable guy. He is at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and this is the joke he makes. Jonah's brothers are here tonight. Sasha and Malia are huge fans, but boys don't get any ideas. 2 words, Predator drones. You will never see it coming. So that's a punchline for him. See, this is a joke, and it got a good laugh from the gathered Washington press corps. Okay, how much time do you have? 10 minutes, okay. Sure, okay, sorry. So Professor David Bromwich, who is probably the best analyst of Obama's generally, he says, a joke, it has been said, is an epigram on the death of a feeling. By turning the killing he orders into an occasion for stand-up comedy, the new president marked the death of a feeling that had seemed to differentiate him from George W. Bush. A change in the mood of a people may occur like a slip of the tongue. A word becomes a phrase, the phrase a sentence, and when enough speakers fall into the barbarous dialect, we forget that we ever talked differently. As I said, that when Bush accidentally killed an American citizen in Yemen, drones stopped. Obama personally approved the killing of Anwar al-Awlaki, a US citizen, but not just him. Okay, he can still be, he still had some role. He was an instigator. So he was accused of instigating the killing at Fort Hood. But that is his 16-year-old son. And if you read the New York Times article, it will be clear to you that Obama is directly engaged in picking each target. That is his 16-year-old son. And when they killed him, they first tried to conceal the fact that he was 16-year-old. So they lied to the press, saying that no, he was actually 21, he was an adult. But then people brought out, actually US journalists, they brought out his birth certificate from Colorado, 16 years old. Yeah, so this is an important statement. Daniel Kleidman, journalist, has written an important book. It's called Kill or Capture. It's about how the whole Obama policy has evolved. And this is from the book. He says the Obama administration's terrorist targeting and detentions system is heavily biased towards killing, inconsistent with constitutional and demographic principles, and unsustainable. The president has become personally invested in a system of targeted killings of dozens of suspected militants annually by drone strikes and special forces raids where the legal standards employed to designate target for lethal action to review periodic reports of mistakes are entirely secret. The reason why he did it was simple, because he had promised to close Guantanamo. He had promised to end torture. So it became complicated to capture. And there was actually a specific incident. They captured somebody in Yemen. It was actually in the Bay of Aden. They captured somebody. Then it became a big complication. They couldn't take him to Guantanamo because that was embarrassing. But they couldn't take him into a proper court because the Republicans would attack him. So he made a determination that from now on, it's far easier to just kill. So finally, the question of law. Not finally, but I'm rushing through that. So, okay. This is Clive Stafford Smith again. Targeting of militants in Pakistan without declaring war is illegal. President Obama would not dare to send an F-16 because that would be a more patent act of war. And this is the former Central Intelligence, head of former Central Intelligence, former director of CIA, Michael Hayden. He says, this program rests on the personal legitimacy of the president and that's not sustainable. I have lived the life of someone taking action on the basis of secret OLC memos, and it ain't a good life. Democracies do not make war on the basis of legal memos locked in the DOJ safe. So I think everybody has to rely on the credibility of Obama. Imagine what would have happened if Mitt Romney had won. I mean, would you want him with this right? Even the US, the people Obama supporters do not want him with this right. And then you have Ben Emerson QC, the UN rapporteur, special rapporteur for counterterrorism. He is now saying this alleged that since Obama took office, at least 50 civilians were killed in follow-up strikes, the bombing of, and when they had gone to help victims, and more than 20 civilians have also been attacked in deliberate strikes on funerals and mourners. And they are saying that if they prove to have happened as war crimes, they are war crimes, and I would endorse that view. Now, just one other thing, that very often in the Western press, what happens is that people find one or two Pakistanis somewhere, or they make that person into a representative voice, and they say that, okay, this guy says that drone attacks are a great idea. They always find, in fact, recently there was an image of a woman. She's the first Oscar winner from Pakistan, and there was an image of her holding a placard saying that Malala, drones kill so that people like Malala lives. And it became a big sort of thing that was promoted around the world. And what they do is that they always find a person in Pakistan and they make that into a representative voice, and they say that that is the authentic voice, and everybody else, when they say the drones are unpopular, that's just nonsense. Well, here is where things actually stand. This is from 2009. How many people favor the drone attacks? There you have it. Then, this is more recent, a few months back, 2012 Pew survey. How many people think it kills too many civilians? 94%. Then, who is the most popular leader in Pakistan right now? The person who is leading the campaign against, the only politician who is leading the campaign against drone strikes, Imran Khan. And then, you have, does that mean that Pakistanis are sympathetic to terrorists? Here is the approval rating. As you can see, they are very unpopular. That is not the question, that if people are against the drone strikes, that they are somehow sympathetic to extremism. They are opposed to the drone strikes because, one, it's illegal, secondly, it kills civilians. So as you can see the numbers here, and then again further on, this is inside FATA, because some people then published, there was a false report, again I dealt with it in the first article that I wrote about the drone attacks. There was a false report that was published saying that actually Pakistanis might oppose it, but inside FATA it's very popular. So interestingly, it was the New America Foundation, which is pro-drone attack. They went in, and when they did a survey, it turned out once again that drone attacks, this is the level of support, opposition it had, and this is the level of support it had. Same thing here, support, sorry, for drone attacks and for opposition, US. And then again, who is the most popular party inside the FATA region where the drone attacks are happening? Once again, the person who's leading the opposition, Imran Khan. Now, question, who is a militant? Even when we say, militants were killed, who is a militant? Now, here, Obama embraced a disputed method of counting civilians. This is again from the New York Times. In effect, counts all military-aged males in strike zones as combatants, according to several administration officials, unless there is explicit intelligence posthumously proving them innocent. That might sound too absurd, but that is the policy, that unless you can somehow rise up from the dead and prove your innocence, you are a combatant, you are a militant. And then military is not an ontological condition. This is just my statement, that militancy is not an ontological condition like anger. It is a disposition. Some people pick up arms, sometimes responding to a specific situation, or dissipate, and it imposes itself or dissipates in response to circumstances. If a certain condition is known to engender militancy, then trying to kill militants while keeping the aggravating conditions unchanged guarantees a perpetual bloodbath. There is one of your militants. This is the effect. People, the mental illness levels have gone high, sedatives are rise, use of sedatives are rise, and psychiatric treatment, antidepressants, the use of it has increased by six-folds, and then you have the consumption of sedatives increased by 30 to 40%. And this is Sadullah, who not only lost 3 family members, but also lost both of his limbs and one eye. He says, again, education, remember, that girl got a lot of attention, well-deserved, not this kid. He says, I wanted to be a doctor, but I can't walk to school anymore. When I see others going, I wish I could join them. And here is a Yemeni lawyer. He says that, Dear Obama, when a drone missile kills a child in Yemen, the father will go to war with you, guaranteed. Nothing to do with Al-Qaeda. So finally, there is some pushback. There's my good friend Clive Stafford Smith, the lawyer, who is leading this pushback. And there's my other friend, Imran Khan, whose party is very popular in Pakistan, again, because he has been the leader. And Here is again Ben Emerson QC speaking about, I will be launching an investigation unit within the special procedures of the UN Human Rights Council to inquire into individual drone attacks. Finally, there's pushback, and thanks to the effort mainly of people like Clive Smith and then Pakistani lawyer Shahzad Akbar, who has taken up the cases of some drone victims. And what he's doing is that using those as representative cases, he has 2 CIA officials who are an FIR has been filed in Pakistan. So as soon as that process goes through, so they refer it to Interpol, which then issues an international arrest warrant. So the pushback has finally started. Now, you might remember, if you have seen the Dr. Strangelove, that scene. The person Dr. Strangelove was modeled after were 2 characters. One was called Albert Walser, and the other was called Herman Kahn. He called himself a futurologist. He once suggested that if it is unreasonable to expect the US government to obtain pilots who are so appalled by the damage they may be doing that they cannot carry out their missions or become excessively depressed or guilt-ridden. So that is what Khan was saying, and he need not have worried, because now you have no contact at all with most of the drone operators are teenagers, and they have been brought in. There's actually a famous incident of a 19-year-old who didn't do very well at school, but turned out that he was a very good gamer. So he has now become an instructor of drone pilots. So the myth of precision and the absence of this, again, would be my final statement. The myth of precision and the absence of risk make it immensely attractive for politicians to seek military solutions to political problems. They also distance citizens from the wars fought in their names. That is the real danger of remote warfare. It erodes political constraints on the use of force. Leaders no longer have to incur risks or endure the onerous demands of legislative approval. You don't have to go to Congress anymore if you can just... deaths occur at a steady rate, but not at a large enough state to cross the threshold of media indifference. If you have read the Galtung and Rouge paper about news values, deaths have to cross a certain threshold before they become newsworthy, at least the farther away they are. So in the West, you're not going to get a lot of attention because the deaths are occurring every day, 10 people, 20 people, one day 70 people, but never on a scale which registers in the Western press. So finally, I will, later on, if somebody wants it, you can email me and I can share this with you. And I'll end there.
Thank you very much. Very provocative and very interesting class to start this fantastic week. We have time for a couple of questions, just a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Yes?
From this reality, from these case studies, what are the lessons towards journalism? Because I can see at least like 3 levels, like politics, military, and journalism, but I'm most interested in the last. So for journalists or students of journalism, which are the lessons from sources, investigation that you can share with us?
Well, I think the answer to that will be, it's more banal, but the thing is that, as you can see, journalists have not been rigorous in asking for sources. For example, if an anonymous official comes and makes a claim, why do they credit it? Why do they not treat it as being suspect? Instead, they're published as if they are they are coming from authority. So the reliance on official sources, one. Second problem is reliance on even things like the New America Foundation numbers. I mean, you get these numbers, these statistics, but you do not really question what is the basis for that. It becomes that you have this the statistics seem to serve a legitimizing process, that you have this whole feedback loop, that first you have a false claim, then it's credited by the media, then that's picked up and quantified by a New America Foundation, and then it's referred back by the media saying that, according to the New America Foundation. But the New America Foundation is not going and doing this research. They're relying on these bogus sources to begin with. So just that degree of not accepting the authority of these people who have arrogated themselves as authority. I mean, why should you, just because New America Foundation says that, why should we accept it? I mean, so the politics of expertise is something that has been the focus of my work, and I think that it's something that needs to be dealt with greater skepticism.
How do you regard the fact that most of the UVA sent to this time got the permission from the official military from Pakistan?
Can you please repeat the question?
I mean, most of the UVA, some said that most of the UVA sent to the Pakistan attack team they got a great deal of permission from the military. in Pakistan. So what would you say?
Yeah, well, the thing is, yes, Pakistani government establishment has been very much complicit in this. So again, the people who are, because Pakistani army itself is conducting collective punishment operations over there. So a lot of the time what they do is that they give the CIA names or lists of people that they want eliminated. So they are very much complicit in that. And so it's not something that is representative of the people, because the people over there are not really keen on this war, because the blowback is, the biggest cost has been paid by Pakistanis. You know, civilian deaths, because the backlash has been ruthless. You know, these people, when you are carrying out these kinds of attacks, so the retaliation, the blowback has been absolutely ruthless for Pakistan. It's devastating, especially the city that I come from. I mean, just the last time I was there, the very first day, you had 9 rockets hit about 500 meters from where my home is. So it's been devastating experience for Pakistan, but the Pakistani military has been completely part of that. Okay.
With northern Mali, the UN's authorised force there, and it's highly likely that the US are going to use drones. Do you think that this is going to repeat itself in Africa now?
It already is. Somalia has been a key target of drone attacks for quite some time. And I think it's precisely this is the problem here, that the costs attached to making such a decision. You know, when Clinton sends Marines to Mogadishu, so there's one incident and they're immediately withdrawn, and because there are political costs attached to that. But in this case, regardless of how well or how badly your policy is doing, people at home are not affected in any way. So you can continue with it endlessly. But that's the problem also, that it's increasing the insecurity, because as the Yemeni lawyer said, that every time you miss, every time you kill a civilian, so you're angering many people who are the survivors. So I mean, just imagine, put yourself in the situation that, well, what if somebody came and killed one of your family members? How would you feel? So it creates this endless cycle in which, and political solutions, that many of these things have a diplomatic political solutions. But what happens is, because you have this tool, so it makes it more attractive to just go and claim that I did this, I killed this many terrorists there. Because if you saw even Obama's supporters, they were using it to his great credit, that look how many Al-Qaeda people he's killing. And they were not talking about whether this policy is sustainable. What is it going to do in the long run? I mean, can you kill every Al-Qaeda man? In fact, the actual number, his own national security advisor had put the number of surviving Al-Qaeda people in Afghanistan at 100. But 100 is not the number of angry people in Afghanistan, because there are so many more right now who are outraged by this policy. So Al-Qaeda becomes anyone who's angry in the future. Okay.
One more question?
Okay.
I have a question. What is American people's attitude to the government's lies about how many people dead, and why so many people died twice or 3 times?
There's a great book by this guy called John Terman. It's called The Deaths of Others. It's about he traces the whole history of American policy in different wars. And what he finds is that there's a consistent pattern, that the American population is very tolerant towards military campaigns outside. That shifts only when the costs begin to come home. So, for example, what happens is that from Korea to Vietnam, only when the costs at home became too substantial, even with Iraq, it became very costly, only then the opposition began. So what happens is that, unfortunately, in this case, there's no cost. So that is the biggest danger in this case, that because there are no costs attached, so this war can go on indefinitely. Yeah. So that is a danger of this policy.
One more question.
So do you think there's ever a scenario where drone strikes are sort of legitimate and actually useful?
Well, the thing is that it's like any other weapon of war. So if there's a war, you're using an F-16, so might as well be using the drone. So it's not that there's a problem with the actual tool, because any weapon of war is causing harm. So the question is ultimately what it does politically. What does it enable? Because it's not just even a question of having the tool, the way it's being used, because it's being used in complete secrecy. And that secrecy has been allowed. It's only now that the UN is asking for transparency. It's asking for, who are the targets, give us information, what is the evidence it's based on. Until now, nobody was asking. In fact, the thing was that one of the things that prompted me to start writing about this back in 2011, June 2011, I did a series of articles for Al Jazeera, and was precisely this thing, because it just became, one, the New America Foundation numbers became completely accepted, and secondly, legally there was no pushback. So it was a good thing that because of that, I got to meet wonderful people like Clive Stafford Smith, and also we coordinated efforts, and we tried to, what we tried to do is that the Bureau of Investigative Journalism has done amazing work in this respect. So what is happening is that finally people are beginning to acknowledge that, well, this thing is not only that it's a very damaging policy, that it is going to have long-term consequences. It's going to have serious consequences, because the thing about it is that blowback matures over many years. When the sanctions in Iraq were a source of great anger, and they finally blew back with 9/11. So what happens is that what is happening right now, the danger is not that none of these people, I can't go to the United States because of my passport. These people from Fatah, they're in no position to go anywhere near the US, so they're no threat to the US. They're no threat to the US. But what happens is that they are not in a position to harm the US. But what does happen is you have somebody like Faisal Shahzad, a Pakistani, son of a former vice air marshal in Pakistan. So from a very affluent family, very liberal and all, studying in the United States. And he nearly blew up Times Square because of his anger over the drone attacks. So the thing is that that's the thing with blowback. It comes out of places which you don't really expect. And the danger is the long-term one.
Thank you very much, and I'll see you at 1 o'clock in the next one. Thank you.
Thank you.